Hi, I'm Dezi. I'm in the BIPOC Critics Lab of 2024.
I'm John Collins. I'm the director of GATZ and the artistic director and founder of Elevator Repair Service.
And I'm Jack Phillips Moore. I am the associate director of new work development here at the Public.
I'm very excited to get into that. Shall we?
Yes, let's shout.
Let's do it. So first I want to start with, it's very obvious that Gatsby is now in the public domain. However, it's one of the most adapted pieces of literature ever, and there are two very notable productions that have happened or are happening currently alongside GATZ. So I want to talk about why Gatsby? Why do you think Gatsby is in the air right now?
This novel has different reputations, all of which, lend to this tendency to adapt it. It's the great American novel, and I think it's a novel to a lot of people about the American dream, the Roaring '20s. It was this jubilant time. I think it's thought of as being a time when a certain kind of American culture was awakening. Not to mention, it is a short novel that is very easy to teach in high school. And I think it's something that everybody reads in high school. Although I did not, and you did not either. So not all of us read it in high school, but so many people do.
It's part of our cultural fabric because of just how often it's been taught and for how many generations it's now been taught.
Totally.
Part of what's so extraordinary about something like GATZ, where you really are sitting there contending with the entire text, is sometimes share this with fellow theater people where you have the experience of, for whatever reason, you're maybe working on a production of Hamlet and you are reading Hamlet again, you go, this is really good. And of course, and I catch myself going of course it is, you idiot, kind of thing. It's Hamlet kind of thing. But I feel that way. I remember when I saw it most recently in GATZ, there was someone in front of me, and there was a particular line from the novel that was just being read, and someone turned to their date and went, "That's a really good line." And it was just people were like, this guy can write.
It's full of amazing phrases.
Yeah, he's got something there. He really has something here.
Keep an eye on this kid. Yeah.
And he was a kid. He was 25.
I know.
Crazy.
Maybe he was 28 when it was published.
Since bringing GATZ back, how do you think you have changed as you start to attack this piece again? How has that shifted how you've worked on it?
Well, it's an interesting way of keeping a piece of theater alive, as opposed to having something that just runs for a long time nonstop. The way that GATZ has lived is by living in short bursts. I think the longest it's ever run was 10 weeks. Which was in 2010 here. It allows me and the ensemble to look at the show with fresh eyes and to bring whatever experiences we've had as individuals, to bring our, whatever enlightenment we may have gained just in our own lives and as a culture since we last did it. And so on the one hand, it gives us an opportunity to make it better, I think, every time we bring it back, to invest in it a little more deeply, to let go of some things that when we look at them again, we realize they don't work. To see new things that do work, and it really just enriches the experience that way. But it also lets us look at the book with fresh eyes. The more we learn and grow as a culture and as people, the more challenging it is to see the greatness in a piece of literature that comes from 100 years ago. So that's been another fascinating part of the process, I think.
Sure.
It's the reason that GATZ always feels propulsive to me is because I'm watching someone and then a bunch of people discover the book, discover the story, and have it. Yeah, it does feel like a possession where suddenly this nondescript office and these office workers become the Roaring '20s.
But I think something that works about it is that it really does take until the end sometimes, when Scott puts the book down and stops reading and it's just coming out of him from memory, that the achievement of that one guy becoming that character should take that long.
Yes,
sure.
And it's almost like we set up something for ourselves that we really have to earn it in some way. Scott really has to earn it as in that role, and he brings everyone along with him that way as well.
I have to tell you, and I feel like this has been a long time coming. So I started working here at the Public in the spring of 2012 as an office assistant. And the first show I saw here as a staff member was one of, if not the, final performance of GATZ. Wow. And all I knew was that it was a full day, that it was in 8 hours of my time, give or take.
Full work day.
Yes, exactly, and that it was the Great Gatsby. And I knew nothing else, to my shame, at that point. I was really just starting professional theater and did not know you or elevator repair service at all. Had not read the book in 10 million years, right? And when I walked out onto Lafayette Street that night, around 11 o'clock or 10:30, whenever it is, I knew I had seen, I still feel this way and will tell anybody who will listen, that it's one of the most foundational pieces of live performance I've ever seen. And the reason for that is, and I think, I've been thinking about this a lot, I think every person who's interested in the arts, whether they're professional artists or they're just folks who love going to theater, each of us could probably name like the 5 things that like, oh, when I saw that movie, when I read that book. GATZ is one of those shows for me because at that point, I really thought theater was this very narrow band. I had done school plays, I had maybe gone to see, touring shows that came to my hometown. But I really thought theater was one thing, and then suddenly I sit in the Newman Theater and everything explodes. And everything that I was told that whether these limits were imposed on my brain or I self-imposed them, they all shattered. Because I didn't know you were allowed to do that. Yeah. I could not fathom how, and I still hold on to that. It's like and now I find myself in a very privileged position where I get to work with artists. I'm a dramaturg now, and so I'm often, encouraging artists as they're working, and I really feel like one of the things that I've been able to pass on from that experience of watching GATZ was there's a lot of artists who are like, especially in times of great want, there's make sure your plays are producible, make sure they're small, make sure they're not, and I'm like, nope.
Explode it.
GATZ exists. It's such a harrowing thing, and when I saw it again, I obviously, 12 years later, I didn't have the same experience of seeing it for the first time. Of course, you can never replace that. But I was able to then reflect on, just still to this day, how kind of punk rock the show is. I think it is the most profound rendering of the Great Gatsby that I've ever seen, and one, I guess, is thank you for that, because you really, really changed my life.
I'm a dramaturg currently, and I have been working on all these pieces and trying to really get in the weeds of what does every single choice mean? How does it mean for our society? What are we saying about everything? And watching GATZ for me was so exhilarating because I was challenged to understand this story without aesthetic, without why exactly in 2024 is this piece specifically happening right now, and just being like, oh, this is such an exciting and deliberate telling of this story, and telling of these people discovering this story and finding this story, and it really, I feel like, empowered me as an audience member to invest in the storytelling and invest in what does this story mean for me specifically, as also just someone that could read this book.
Sure, and I hope that's one thing that it does, is that it keeps it very open in that way, that you can put yourself in Scott's position as someone who doesn't have a pre-existing relationship to the book. Let it just exist on its own terms and see how it does. Yeah. In a way, I think one of the advantages of not doing it in a sort of period setting and period costumes is it's not really suggesting that this is anything but these words. And see where they take you. See where they take your imagination, just see what they do to you on their own. We wanted to put a book on stage and have it still be a book.
Right.
Yeah.
Not try to own it, not try to turn it into something else. To see what that would do. It was a big experiment. It really was. We did not go into this with any kind of certainty about where it would end up. Certainly with no certainty that we would be doing every word of it. It's another advantage of working on something on and off over a very long period of time. You get to sort of put one toe in at a time on some of the bigger challenges. Some of what comes across as very bold choices now, I think, may have been arrived at very gradually.
Yeah.
But we had the opportunity, and thankfully, we had the support of the public and others, especially the public, to develop that experiment and to patiently see where it took us.
A huge thing for me was like book versus play, and I really could feel the entire time this collision of like, this is the book.
The forms colliding.
Precisely.
Yes.
And I think that in my work as a dramaturg, I don't know how you feel about this, a lot of time I've been taught in different institutions and things, when working with a playwright in dialogue, is like, cut everything that's not moving the play forward. Cut everything that's not pushing the play to the next plot point. And GATZ, to me, felt like a challenge of like, you're gonna sit and listen to this person talk about this house for 5 pages.
Yeah.
And I wonder how...
No, it's true.
Yeah.
And that was the first challenge that we faced, was that, okay, we're sort of coming from our own little secret tradition of wanting impossible projects to try to pull off. And so the idea of doing every word of this book was meant to be a kind of perverse, doomed assignment. Like, it was not supposed to work. It was just supposed to be something that would be so hard to do that we would try to do it, and there would be some interesting failures along the way, and it would produce something else that we couldn't predict. It's a famous book, it's iconic, it's all those things we were talking about at the beginning, and therefore it must be treated with religious reverence, but no, Fitzgerald didn't treat his characters with that kind of reverence. He doesn't treat his own culture with that kind of reverence, and the irreverence, I think, is something that injects life into it. Absolutely. It doesn't knock it down; it builds it up.
And I think the way that sentiment relates to the idea of the American dream and how the book wrestles with it makes me feel like, oh, I can also take this active investigation of what it means to be in America now. Like, that's the way the play is like functioning for me in this space as well. Is that like, oh, like The Great Gatsby itself as a book, the concept of the American dream is also something that's not supposed to be held on a pedestal. It's supposed to be taken down and looked at and played with.
No, it takes it down a notch for sure. It's not really a book that glamorizes the American dream. Even though what you know about the main character is that he's an incredible self-made man, but then it ends in tragedy.
Yeah.
Everyone is sort of sent, for better or worse, everyone is just sent back to where they came from. Personally. Gatsby realizes, on some level, and Nick realizes about Gatsby that he is just this poor kid from the Midwest. The book concludes on an extremely personal note. It's all about Nick sort of understanding who he is and what all this experience has done to him and what he's come to know about himself. I think that's what makes it a great book, not because it's some perfect picture of the American dream or of the 1920s. Those things are all very flimsy by design.
Right.
And they are meant to fall away. And that's what's always made me feel very justified in setting this against such a drab backdrop. Because all of those things, all those aesthetic things, are just in people's imagination in the book.
Right.
Totally. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk today.